Some people think that life is made up of activities. Others think it's made up of dreams. Today we are gathered here to welcome my brother, Aditya Mukherjee, to the latter club. A very good evening to our chief guest for today's function, the Honorable Minister of State for Human Resource Development, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Mr. T.N. Chaturvedi, former Governor of Karnataka, Mr. Vinod Rai, Mr. V.N. Kaul, Mr. V.K. Shunglu, who have each held the prestigious post of Comptroller and Auditor General of India. We'd also like to welcome Mr. Arun Mishra, Secretary of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation, Mr. Ravinder Singh, Secretary, Department of Culture, and all our other distinguished guests, friends, and family who have taken the time out of their busy schedule to join us here today to support the young author. I'm Arnav Mukherjee, and I thank you all for joining us to celebrate the launch of Boomtown. Books are strange things. They let you have conversations with yourself through the voice of somebody else. Before we start the conversation about Boomtown, I feel I must first introduce our honorable chief guest, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. It's just two lines, don't worry. One of our foremost man of letters, Dr. Tharoor has held many posts. He's been the Under-Secretary General of the UN, Minister in the Government of India, and a public figure. But most importantly, he's a leader who can connect with us and convey to us a better idea of ourselves through his words. I remember I had the privilege of hearing Dr. Tharoor speak at my high school, and his audience then consisted of students from 80 countries, but in a matter of minutes, they could all connect to his universal message. I would now request Ms. Sohini Pal, Assistant Editor at Rupa, to present a bouquet to our chief guest. I have to confess, as his brother, I always knew Aditya would be a writer someday, despite my mother's protestations that his destiny was to be a computer engineer. I remember in childhood, while all the other kids were throwing their GI Joes at each other in massive fights, Aditya would always wonder, there must be a narrative reason why they were fighting. His obsession with storylines didn't even escape our cricket matches where we used to make up our own teams. I remember my favorite was Atlantis. But I'm a bit relieved now that he has found an adult outlet for his childish fantasies. I now invite Mr. Kapish Mehra, MD of Rupa and Company, and the publisher of Boomtown, to say a few words about Aditya.
Thanks, Arnav, for that wonderful introduction. I have a 37-minute, 25-second speech ready for Boomtown, but because Dr. Tharoor is in a hurry, so I'll sort of skip most of it. And I won't talk about the book, but I'll talk about three very important people related to the book. One is Dr. Tharoor. The second is Kaushalya, who's the commissioning editor. And third is Mr. P. Mukherjee. So sorry, Aditya, it's not about you anymore. So, while we were discussing in office who should be the chief guest, etc., who fits the bill, who's young, who's an author, etc., there are many names that come up. But then we always end up choosing Dr. Tharoor. Now there's a reason for that, because as far as we are concerned, Dr. Tharoor at Rupa is the chairman of a very profitable organization called the Best-Selling Club. So every book he releases turns out to be a bestseller. The last one he released here sold 500,000 copies. So that's why, Dr. Tharoor, thank you for being here and thank you for releasing well, yes. So consenting to release Boomtown. Second, I think I must make a mention of Aditya's commissioning editor Kaushalya here today, because I do remember this book came to us in some time ago, and there was one person who was championing the cause of the book through and through, who believed in Aditya from day one before all of us had seen the manuscript. And I think Boomtown is as much as Aditya as Kaushalya. So congratulations to both of you. And the third is P. Mukherjee, Mr. P. Mukherjee, I think Aditya's father. Apart from the fact that he's your dad, there is also a legacy here, and I think Dr. Tharoor may want to know, because my dad published him, so I was, by virtue of that, I was supposed to be publishing Aditya. But the interesting thing is that the selection happened by Kaushalya, and I didn't know about it. So very professional young gentleman here who gave us a book that we all would love to publish. So with that, I would just skip the 37-minute, 25-second speech, and all the best to Aditya. Boomtown is something that we're all looking forward to. The initial response has been fantastic, and I'm sure if not 500,000, but at least half of that number will certainly happen thanks to Dr. Tharoor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mehra. I now request our chief guest, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, to release the book and to say a few words on this occasion. Dr. Tharoor is himself a renowned author who has provided a nuanced commentary on India's transition in his various columns and books like The Elephant, The Tiger, and The Cell Phone. We are truly honored and privileged to have him here with us.
Mr. Mehra, Mr. Mukherjee, our very distinguished members of the audience, friends, I hope that covers everyone. It really is a delight to launch Aditya Mukherjee's Boomtown. First of all, because the advent of a new writer is always a cause for celebration. Ours is a culture where there is now an increasing number of young, talented, imaginative writers emerging onto the national scene. And they're doing so in a language and a sensibility that is all their own, that is fresh, that is vivid, that is real, and that is the language spoken and experienced by Indians in English in India every day. It's striking that the development and growth of Indian English writing, I think we all have abandoned this phrase Indo-Anglian that the critics used to use, but writings by Indians in English, which many assumed after independence would go down. You know, before independence, you had a handful of names: Mulk Raj Anand, Raja Rao, Kamala Markandeya, Shanta Rama Rao. That was about it. And people thought that that was a phenomenon of the British rule, and once the British had gone, we would see a reassertion of writing in Indian languages, and Indian writing in English would decline. But in fact, it has actually grown. And it's not just grown, it has branched out in a very interesting way. Till about the late 90s, what you had was Indians writing in English for an international audience. Their principal publishers were abroad, and the largest share of their readership was abroad. There were certainly a discerning minority of Indians who read these books, but it was still very much an international or globalist sort of phenomenon. But in the last dozen years or so, we have seen the advent of Indian writers who are first published in India, who have their strongest, their most natural, and their most receptive readership in India. And it shows that Indian publishers themselves have woken up to the need to cultivate an Indian audience with Indian stories told by Indian writers in an English that actually reads as if it was spoken or written in India. Aditya Mukherjee belongs to that generation. We've seen now quite a range of books of this nature. There is, of course, Chetan Bhagat, Amish Tripathi, Ashwin Sanghi. There have been a number of young authors who, as far as I know, have not even been published abroad. They've only been published in India, but have made great successes of themselves as writers in India, writing for Indian readers, and on a wide variety of subjects. What Aditya has done, therefore, is join an illustrious group, and with pride and confidence, to make his mark in it. Equally, he has done something very difficult in his novel. He has actually attempted to impart a larger series of lessons through fiction that he could as easily have done in writing a non-fiction book, but has done far more interestingly by dressing it up in fiction. This is a novel about 4 young Indians who set up a restaurant and plan to set up a restaurant chain. And what's interesting about this is that there actually hasn't been an Indian book like this. Can any of you think of an Indian book in any Indian language or in English about young people setting up a business? No. At least I'm not aware of one. No one I know is aware of one. So he's taken a subject which has not traditionally occupied this intellectual space. he has made a lively, interesting story about it, which is also taken in lots of other things, including breaking across boundaries and barriers in our society, including the challenges of entrepreneurship and how to get things done and the problems of getting things done in our society. He has actually managed to cover a whole range of aspects of Indian experience, but he's done it through the story of four friends. And because he writes well and because his characters are real people and they speak like real people to each other, you may have no particular interest in entrepreneurship or in the breaking down of barriers or in linking of people across sort of various cultural and sociological other divides, but the story will carry you through and you might imbibe some broader lessons. I have always found the best kind of didacticism is that which does not tell you that it's trying to teach you anything. It's telling you a story. And, I always used to joke that, when I was in America, the UN, there was a long-running commercial for a beer that said it was the beer that reaches parts that other beers don't reach. So I said the great thing about fiction is that fiction reaches parts of readers that other kinds of books don't reach. Non-fiction can't reach you in the same way that fiction can. I say this as somebody who rather ruefully admits that I've written far more non-fiction than fiction now. My 14 books, only 4 are fiction. And yet, the reason that that's often done is because non-fiction is frankly easier to write. We're all speaking non-fiction every day. You can write more or less as you like. Whereas fiction involves creating a space in your head, creating an alternative moral universe, populating it with people, characters, episodes, issues, concerns, that as real to you as what you are actually dealing with in your daily life. And only then can you write a credible work of fiction. That takes a lot of effort. It's very difficult for any of us who are battling the pressures of a busy day job or a day life to find that kind of space in our heads to write fiction. So I commend Aditya for having done that. I certainly hope that this book marks a debut of a novelist who will continue to write. His brother implied that it was a choice between being a computer engineer and being a novelist. Not necessarily. I think you can probably try and do both for a while until you do well enough at one not to need to do the other. But usually need to do comes from writing. I always used to say for myself that George Bernard Shaw put it best, that he said, I write for the same reason a cow gives milk. You write because it's inside you, it's got to come out, you feel that urge inside you, that's why you write. Otherwise, when you think about it, it's not a terribly rational thing to do, to abandon your friends, your entertainment, cricket on television, whatever, to sit down in front of a desk or a computer or a laptop and just write silently alone for hours on end, day after day, week after week, without even being sure that the result will be amounting to anything a publisher would be willing to publish, without being sure that anyone will read it even if it's published. It is an extraordinary thing to take on. And with non-fiction, at least you know what you're going to talk about, and if you're famous enough or your subject is interesting enough, some people will read it. With fiction, it's an adventure, it's an experiment, it's a risk. So you only write fiction because you feel that urge, that need to do it. And I want to commend Aditya for having felt that and for having acted on it so successfully and found a good publisher who, with a reputation for very many bestsellers, as he immodestly reminded us, he does do very well. So I hope that that you might be able to not worry about another kind of day job after a while, but keep writing, whether it's after work or instead of work, because talent should always be encouraged to develop and grow. And just as this town in your title is booming, I hope your writing career and the sales of this book will also boom. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your kind words of encouragement, sir. I particularly enjoyed the analogy of the book to beer and and the analogy of the process of writing a book to a cow giving milk. Now I would like to invite Aditya to share his insights on his journey, to give us some insight into his journey on writing this book.
Thanks, Arnav. He has disappeared. Thanks, Dr. Thu, for his kind words. I think Dr. Thu has explained the book and everything about it far better than I could. So instead, I shall start talking about the first book I started writing. This was when I was in class 9th, and I was very serious. It was a very serious attempt. It was a book titled Jack Space, A Space Story. I wrote 5 pages, and my exams came, and I stopped writing. But the bug had bit, And over the next 10, 15 years, whether I was doing my engineering, whether I was working supposedly as an engineer, whether I was doing a master's in economics, I kept writing. The only time when I actually took a break was when I first found entrepreneurship. This was a startup I had embarked on with 4 friends in Singapore. And it was very exciting. It was an adventure. It was totally different from my 9-to-5 job. We used to sneak out of our office whenever possible. We used to work on weekends. And that really stayed with me, kind of changed me as a person. And the next time I got a chance to write a book, which was in I am Bangalore's second year, when people finally stopped caring whether they're flunking in exams, I knew it had to be about entrepreneurship. It was something I knew about. It was something that was very close to my heart. And the question only was that what will be the startup that I will write about in my book. I didn't want to give away any ideas about what I would actually want to do sometime in the future. So I had become entrepreneur enough to learn that. So I was stuck. My previous startup had been about compliance applications for enterprises in the banking sector on BlackBerries, which was about as exciting as giving a geography exam. So I knew that couldn't work. So one day when I was visiting some friends in Delhi, I was sitting in Kareem's in Old Delhi. And I was sitting with my plate of rasala and shirmal. It was a good day. And it struck me that a lot of my friends who work in corporates have a dream of starting a restaurant. Right? And it's because everyone likes going out, everyone likes having a good time, and people want to create that experience for others. People want to share that experience. And I started thinking, if I wanted to do that, what would be a good way to do it? And it struck me that one of the best ways to do it is to actually reach out to people like people who would own Kareem's. And I think that in entrepreneurship in India, maybe that is a step that a lot of us in professional jobs don't want to take. Right? We think of entrepreneurship just in terms of technology, technological entrepreneurship, e-commerce, and so on. We don't want to take that step when we're actually reaching out to the old economy, reaching out to people who are working in traditional jobs and doing it really well. And that combined with the fact that I love food was the germination of this book. So I was writing it in second year in Bangalore. I was mostly walking around in my pajamas and tousled hair. And a lot of people helped me there. So my fiancée, Mansi, being one of them. A lot of the chapters, the ideas come from her. I would also have to thank, firstly, my mom for being giving me the encouragement that any son would die to have. And my father for doing a lot of heavy lifting with the editing of the book. I'm lucky to have a father who is a gold medalist in English literature, so that helped a lot. Apart from that, my brother, of course, we can't see him now, but I'm really lucky to have a close relationship with him for such a long time, even though we have been in different countries for almost 10 years. So we've actually just finished writing a new manuscript a few months back, which we've co-authored, so let's see what happens with that. It's pretty exciting. Other than that, I'd like to thank, of course, Kaushalya. As Mr. Mayor mentioned, she's everything a writer could really hope for. She's become a good friend, and I mean, this book would be nothing without her. As well as Sohini, who worked very hard on this book, and Rupa's marketing team, Hina, Ankit, Hohoy, who have all become good friends. So I just hope this book inspires people to try and create new things, and mostly I hope it makes them feel hungry and enjoy life. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tharu, for your presence, and I'm sure we all enjoyed learning about Aditya's experiences moving from Jack Space, A Space Story, to Boomtown. He's definitely got better at titling his books. Now I would like to invite any questions from the audience about the book or Aditya's experiences. I personally am particularly curious about how many cappuccinos went into each page, so hopefully you'll answer that, but the floor is open now to the first question. Now you'll get a chance to see why Aditya's school teachers were always so frustrated by his horrible cursive writing skills by getting to sign some copies of the book. While he does so, I want to take the opportunity to thank you once again for your presence and support. It is definitely you who made this a success. Thank you.